Good evening. Good evening and very warm welcome. It's really fantastic to see all of you here. I actually got locked out and couldn't get in, so I'm so happy that you're all here. I will be very brief. I know Bjarke has a lot to show, and so it's really important to get to him as quickly as possible. Bjarke Ingels is not a stranger to the school. He's been here many times, lectured here many times, taught here on a number of occasions, and it's really wonderful to have you back. So welcome. I think there are sort of very few people who one knows that their sheer presence creates a buzz and creates a certain sense of excitement. And Bjarke is certainly one of those people who has the capacity through his own presentation, but also his work, to really generate excitement and enthusiasm. In some sense, it's not surprising to read or to know that he wanted to be a comic book artist. I think this sense of the wit, the fun, and those of you who don't know him, you will experience it very quickly, is always there, is in him, and is very much in the projects because there's a certain sense of enjoyment, joy of life, and I think that also translates into his architecture. He, not so long ago, made a book called Yes is More. It's, of course, refers, I suppose, in some sense to less is more and less is a bore, and so yes is more. Yes is also the title of a movie by an English director called Sally Potter. I don't know if you know of this film, but I do recommend it. For Sally Potter, the word yes has an incredible meaning because it's about the possibility of saying, yes, I am willing to do this, is an affirmation of agreement, the agreement to participate. And I think for Bjarke also, this yes is more is on the one hand, Bjarke's sense of yes is more and is more. But it's also similarly, though probably in a very different tone than Sally Potter, is also an affirmative act of architecture. And I think it's really through his reorganization of the office, his sort of understanding of how architecture must sort of be rethought, that he's also managed to provide us with a very different sense of architectural possibilities, of connections, of juxtapositions, of unthought of realities, and so on. And I think in that sense, it's also a very optimistic project that he presents that makes things that have not been thought of as possibilities, and in that sense opens up for all of us our own version of what our possibilities would be. He has, in the past few years, been more and more involved in New York City and doing projects in the States, and is now involved in a number of projects that are on site and others that will soon be on site. But is also continuing his practice in his homeland and in Denmark. And a fun-sounding project seems to be the one that he's working on, which is building the house for Lego. So he will have the capacity to combine his sense of fun and enjoyment with a program that's actually based on the idea of something comedic in one sense as well, I guess. He also is now just recently finished a summer installation at the National Building Museum and will soon have a retrospective there at DC. It's wonderful to see him back here at the GSD. Please join Bjarke Ingels. Welcome.
Thank you. It's a great pleasure to be back. Actually, I moved to America exactly 4 years ago on the 1st of September on a J1 visa from Harvard. So I owe Harvard my entire existence in this country. This is a photo from our office in New York. This is our office in Copenhagen. It's actually inside a former Carlsberg factory where they used to make the least interesting part of the beer, the bottle cap. This is big in New York. And some of you might be able to recognize a few current GSD students. I can see at least a few. We also do haircuts. And I think the way we try to work, and maybe first a disclaimer, I got a little bit sort of over greedy in preparing this slideshow, so it could be a little over an hour, but I promise that if it gets too slow, I'll make some jumps in the presentation. But essentially, I wanted to try to really sort of explain how it is we work. And in the beginning, we always try to identify what are the key criteria for designing. Essentially, what information are we going to use to inform our design decisions? So that, in that sense, we never do anything just for fun or because we have a particular preference for this kind of shape or whatever. We always try to identify what is the knowledge or the information we need in order to make informed decisions. And just to give you a few examples, and these things can come from all kinds of places. It's not just form follows function, but just a few quick examples. We got invited to do a so-called viewing tower in Aarhus, the second city of Denmark. It was going to be 25 feet tall, which is like hardly a tower. But and they wanted to have to enjoy the view of the port, which is the biggest development area right now in the city. And they wanted to make it ADA accessible, so we had to install an elevator. So half the budget was that elevator. And we thought it was kind of an untraumatic way to take an elevator 25 feet up and then look out and then take the elevator back. So we thought maybe we could solve the ADA access in another way. And to get 25 feet up, you need 500 feet of ramp. So we thought we could make this like weird promenade in the sky, almost like making a flower, where the journey is actually the destination. We thought we're in the port, so we could make it out of raw steel, like this hybrid between a Sarah and shipbuilding. We got a shipbuilder to actually make our models. It was like by far the coolest model we ever built, and the heaviest. Basically, it would sit on the edge of the pier. You would get this like amazing meandering. Actually, the handrail is also the load-bearing structure. So everything is like this, a single monolithic steel structure, sort of tipping on the edge of the pier. We didn't win. But the idea was that somehow by identifying this issue about the ADA access and reallocating some resource from like a boring elevator to like an exciting journey was somehow what created the project. Another example is the project we have right now at the National Building Museum. We got asked to do a summer installation, and it was suggested to do a maze. It was going to be placed inside this amazing room inside the National Building Museum. It's the scale of an urban space, but under a roof. And we thought, since there's so much height, the typical maze is purely two-dimensional. It's like this like very flat experience. We thought we should really explore the third dimension, and came up with this idea that if we extract a cone from this like a vertical volume, we create this situation that when you finally have gone through the entire maze and reach the center, you actually are rewarded with the knowledge that you know exactly how you got there. from the center, you can overview the entire maze. So as you go through it, in some cases it's like incredibly narrow, like this sort of vertical canyon. And then as you journey through it, the spaces really transform. And finally, once you reach the center, you can start getting sort of a sense of everywhere you've gone through. And it's designed in such a way that when you reach the center, you've traveled through 95% of the maze, and there's just almost a straight route taking you out. So again, like this attempt to introduce the third dimension to an otherwise two-dimensional experience. And maybe as a last example, this is my old high school. We're currently building this part, some classrooms and dressing rooms and a football field. But the first phase was we were asked to do a sports hall. And the only place to put it was either on the football field, but it's sort of the national sport of Europe. So to ruin the football fields would be a pretty lame decision. So we thought, let's put it in the courtyard. So we would have to dig it down. And handball halls. Handball is a Danish sport. It was invented by a Danish officer. But it's 15 feet of height you need on the perimeter, and then you need 30 feet in the middle. And since we got the commission from my old math teacher, we thought we would sort of base the design on the mathematical formula for a ballistic arch. So it is essentially the geometry of a thrown handball that has shaped this sort of curvature of the glue lamp beams. In the courtyard, it creates this sort of molehill. And of course, we were afraid of occupying the courtyard. So we placed this furniture sort of inviting people to invade. There's a small auditorium over here. The entire edge is the height of a bench. But actually this soft, friendly molehill has actually sort of significantly increased the use of the courtyard. So this is the construction site of phase 2. Also, we had the chance, the canteen is in the basement. So we created this new entrance that gave the high school a new front door. So you enter into the canteen, then you continue down into the sports hall. And just one aspect, you have daylight washing the walls, so the perimeter is always sort of glowing. And there are no finishes. Essentially, everything you see is hard-working material. So you have the glue lamp beams, that is the structure in the ceiling. You have the sports floor. The concrete of the retaining walls is the actual retaining walls. So there was no secondary application of finishes. And then the furniture incorporates all the lighting. So you have this slightly magical atmosphere in the evening. So essentially, a series of examples of how, once you've identified what are the key criteria, it becomes rather easy to address it. The last case, it was obviously this idea that there was no place to put it. So to not ruin the courtyard, somehow the design had to somehow be accommodating both inside but also on the outside. But once you've identified what the big question is, you don't necessarily have the answer. Then suddenly, of course, when you explain it, it looks like a very linear thing. But in order to get there, you have to go through a lot of different tests. So then you come up with a model, and then you test it against the selection criteria that you have identified. So quite often we have to go through a lot of failed attempts before we reach anything interesting. An example is a project we did recently in this beautiful valley. It's the Vallée du Choux in Switzerland, an hour from Geneva. And actually, in this building is the headquarters for Audemars Piguet, the Swiss watchmakers. It was founded by these two gentlemen. You see, the historical watchmaking. Essentially, they still make the watches in the same way. What's fascinating about Swiss watchmaking is that it's very much like architecture. It's the art and science of extracting the maximum amount of performance out of a minimum amount of material. And we were sort of invited to imagine how to introduce a museum of the history of watchmaking and of the company in this like beautiful pastoral Swiss landscape. So we started, first our thinking was you have like the existing headquarters and the historical factory that used to make the watches up in this attic. So we started trying to fit in by simply like connecting the existing buildings. But somehow it always became this like weird wall against the street. So we thought like we should probably like stay behind and focus on something lower that could coexist with the existing buildings. We tried breaking the museum down into its different parts as little pavilions, almost like a village behind the existing building. We tried to organize it as a route. Basically, it's a linear exhibition where you go through the different exhibitions and then you end up visiting the attic. So we like played with various ideas. Then we tried to like really stay low, like keep it sort of within the landscape. And we had to like basically kiss a lot of frogs before we found something that was like remotely promising. So basically just like what we ended up with was this idea of like taking the linear sequence of exhibitions, turning it into a single trajectory, and then to fit it into the site, we coil it up in this double spiral that spirals in and out. That basically becomes the exhibition. So you go through into the central space, and then from here you move back out up to the attic, and then you're done. So basically we follow the sort of topography of the landscape, and then by sort of inclining the roof in different directions, we can bring daylight and views deep into the exhibition space. So even though it's a deep floor plate, you have a lot of relationships with the surrounding valley. So from the roof, it's like almost just like an incision in the landscape. So basically you enter into the existing headquarters, and then even though it's like this like linear sequence, the ceiling heights and the amount of daylight changes from like very controlled to completely open. So it becomes this like rather varied journey until you finally take the stair up to the historical attic. So the first thing, as you come through the existing building, you have a beautiful view over the valley. Then you get through some of the more controlled spaces. You even pass along the workshops where the master watchmakers sit and repair the clockworks. And then as you move towards the center, you actually have a rather large sort of a central exhibition space. And if you notice, sort of throughout these cracks, you get daylight and views of the surrounding valley. But to not sort of interrupt and like in a way to almost like quote the art of watchmaking, there are no columns. It's a very thin steel roof, sort of clad in brass, and then it's the glass itself that is actually carrying that's carrying the roof, and it's basically because like glass is stronger than steel. It's when it's in compression, but it cannot do any tension, and it also handles seismic events very badly, and the Jura Mountains is a seismic zone. So when there's an earthquake, it trembles and breaks. But because everything is curved, the rigidity of the geometry of the curvature makes the glass strong enough to carry the roof, and also it means that you have like this sort of completely blatant relationship with the surrounding landscape. So again, this idea of trying to sort of squeeze as much performance as possible out of as little material as possible. And then for the existing building, we refurbish it. This is the stair that takes you to the attic, and here we stick to the sort of the local traditional materials. So basically, we got the job. I won a nice watch. It's the favorite watch of JC, just to let you know. But essentially this idea that even though like when you explain the project, it feels like almost like natural, that it could almost only be like this, and sometimes for ourselves, once we arrive, you feel it couldn't be any other way. But in order to get here, we had to like go through this like onslaught of like like different attempts. A lot of them like really rather bad, but like even though individually they didn't succeed, they were like important steps in identifying which way to go. So of course, like model making and testing is a big part of the office. We love to make models and huge models, and sometimes we make models out of Lego. This was a project we did that we actually called the Lego Towers because it has this modularity that characterizes Lego. So we actually got Lego to sponsor 250,000 Lego bricks, 2,000 Lego people, and 500 trees to make this huge model. And when we were done building it, there was like Lego left over the entire office. So this is just one of my colleagues walking around the office with a camera recently. So there's like basically Lego everywhere. Even the signage is made out of Lego. And like this is one of my colleagues, Gabriel and Frederick, doing a workshop with the citizens of Copenhagen on how to sort of influence your own environment using Lego. And Lego even copied one of our designs. This is the Copenhagen Harbor Bath Lego style in the flagship Lego store in Copenhagen. So you can imagine when Lego approached us and wanted us to compete for making this new Lego house in the hometown of Lego. It's basically a house dedicated to all aspects of Lego culture, in a way looking at the world through the eyes of Lego. So it's going to be, we went completely bananas because like I basically made a small speech for the team when we kicked it off, and I said, if Big had been founded with the purpose of building a single building, it would have to be the Lego house. So we desperately wanted to get this job. It's going to be in the middle of Bumfuck, Denmark. It's a small town of Billund. It actually has the second international airport in Denmark because the owner of Lego, who's also the richest man in Denmark, he likes airplanes. So of course, like Lego has this amazing ability that they communicate visually better than almost anyone I know, because they can make like a 5-year-old read like a long, complicated instruction manual for how to do like a huge castle without using a single word, just communicating visually. So we try to copy them. I think I'm gonna do a little bit of voiceover anyway, because we're not at the Lego level yet. But so we made this little film explaining the project we're doing. So basically, it's in the middle of the town square of Billund, where the city hall used to be, and it was important that it shouldn't be this like Lego invasion of the city. So we decided to create this village where we took all of the programs that would have like sort of a more urban character and organized them around a central square, what we call the Lego Square, that is completely public. Then it becomes like this covered cave, because above the exhibitions, and finally the Keystone Gallery that sort of finishes it off, create this sort of accessible roofscape of interconnected playgrounds. So even if you are not, going to visit the Lego house, if you're a citizen of Billund, this is actually sort of part of your urban environment. You can enter the covered square. There's like an auditorium that can open up towards the outside. And then basically at the heart of the square, so basically this is also like imagined to be almost like a living room, like an indoor urban space for the locals. Then you have this staircase surrounding some epic Lego installation. You have the Keystone Gallery in the middle, where it's almost like a classic art gallery, and then you have like this sort of series of overlapping spaces with all the exhibitions. And then finally, you can descend into the holiest of the holy in Lego. which is something called the vault. Every AFOL, which is adult fan of Lego, knows that the vault is where they keep the first of every single Lego box that has ever been produced. So it's a space that's designed to be able to withstand nuclear holocaust. This is the Yellow Castle from 1978. It was the first Lego set that I got, which was the first year they introduced the minifigures, and it's apparently one of the sort of the gems of the Lego collector. We found we had to pay 2,000. Like two of my colleagues that are actually former GSD students, Kat Huang and Brian Yang, got married. So we made a sort of a fake wedding in the office for everybody who couldn't go to the wedding in Texas. And we gave them the Lego castle. And I think it retails for around $2,000 on eBay. So if you have one, it's worth its weight in gold. And finally, the entire roof is this interconnected series of playgrounds that are also publicly accessible for the people in Billund. So yeah, we just broke ground. The family laid the foundation stones, concrete Lego bricks. That the entire museum rests on, and this is me together with all the richest people in Denmark. And if you're interested, if you can't wait, you can actually buy the Lego house in a Lego architecture set, including a minifig that is built exactly like me. So basically, I think one of the things that I really like about Lego is that it has this, capacity for empowerment. That it's not just offering the children or anyone like playing with Lego the possibility for like a pre-digested experience, but it actually empowers the children and people with Lego to actually create their own world and inhabit it through play. And also, when you look at Minecraft, the success of Minecraft, which is essentially digital Lego, is again that instead of like giving this premeditated experience, it gives the children the capacity to create their own environment and then inhabit it. And that is exactly what architecture should be about. It's not just a question of style or aesthetics or form or whatever. It's a question of actually sort of actively influencing your own environment in order to inhabit it. Like you can actually really sort of create or recreate or modify the world so it's a little bit more like your dreams. Like just some examples, like of course, like architecture is much slower than Lego. So even though we have quite a few projects on the way, like a lot of the work that is built has been conceived like almost 10 years ago. But like one example is we did this project in Copenhagen called The Mountain that transformed a traditional apartment building into a man-made mountain of houses with gardens. You have like a suburban lifestyle. Your kids can run out and play, but it's in the middle of the city. And this is made possible by putting it on a parking structure. There's a Swiss elevator, a funicular elevator that gives you access to all the apartments. The parking is naturally ventilated and naturally illuminated. The holes that provide the natural ventilation also creates a giant urban artwork for free. And like some of the same ideas, we took one step further at the outskirts of Copenhagen, basically where cattle takes over. We created something called the 8 House that combines shops and offices. Like shops and offices on the ground with townhouses that are lifted by the offices up into the sunlight and the views, and also creating this mountain path that sort of expands the public realm. Instead of being restricted to only meeting your neighbors on the ground, you can actually walk or bicycle all the way to the penthouse. So it's not just a facade design or a sculptural form, it's actually a three-dimensional urban condition where you really see social life occurring throughout the vertical dimension as well. Like the amenities are all connected where the 8 crosses itself. There's this ricocheting stair that connects the ground to the roof terrace. And also, all of Copenhagen is as flat as what you can see here. So suddenly, like this has become like a destination where people go to promenade to enjoy the view of their city. So like I think these are like some of the humble examples of where we try to make the city we live in a little bit more like we would want it to be, like with mountains and sort of Mediterranean mountain towns. Like another aspect is this idea of like not seeing the city just as an accumulation of architecture, but really seeing it as a man-made ecosystem. We've been working a lot about trying to sort of reimagine sustainability, because like sustainability has of course become like this big buzzword, but it's always been associated with this idea of needing to somehow, like this sort of Protestant idea that it has to hurt to do good. I think this is a picture taken in Copenhagen at the United Nations Conference on Climate Change 5 years ago. And I think you can see on every single world leader, especially Sarkozy, that it was a complete failure. None of the goals were reached. And the general discussion was really drowning this, like, I think, misconception that sustainability is a question of how much of our existing quality of life we're prepared to sacrifice to afford being sustainable. So when we got invited to do the Danish Pavilion at the Shanghai World Expo, where the subject was sustainable cities, we thought, like, what if we could sort of turn it the other way around and focus on all the aspects where sustainability actually makes life more enjoyable. So we took like the aspects of Copenhagen that makes it both sustainable and enjoyable, and condensed it into this road streetscape, complete with the blue bicycle lanes of Copenhagen and the Copenhagen city bikes. For 20 years, we've had this system of free bicycles. So allowing people to experience the joy of riding a bike through the city instead of being stuck in a traffic jam. You could also ride through the exhibition, making it the perfect museum for impatient people, because you could do everything in 3 minutes. So it had like all of these sort of informal elements, like benches, and actually our first project from 2002 was the Copenhagen Harbor Bath, that sort of extends public life into the water, because our port has become so clean you can swim in it. You don't have to drive for hours to get to Cape Cod. You can actually jump in the port in the middle of the city. So we recreated this experience, allowing the Chinese to experience how clean, if not how cold, Danish harbor water is. And finally, we thought, like, we need to get the Chinese to come and experience this. I mean, it's fine if it's there, if they don't actually go there. So we started looking for common denominators between Denmark and China, and found that in the Chinese public school curriculum, they have 3 fairy tales by Hans Christian Andersen, one of them being the story of the mermaid. So we proposed to move the mermaid to China. When the Danish Nationalist Party, the Danish equivalent of the Tea Party, heard about it, they tried to pass a law specifically against moving the mermaid. So I had to go to Parliament and argue her case, and finally we got her. Then we had to get her through Chinese customs, and then as an exchange, when she was gone, we invited Ai Weiwei to do an installation. And he installed a Chinese surveillance camera in the pavilion. It's the same camera that the Chinese state has installed in front of his house. So it transmits a live image to where she normally sits in Copenhagen. But the idea from his side being that for 6 months, it was the only live TV feed from China to the rest of the world, uncensored. So like a loophole in the great firewall of China. So this is sort of the first time where we try to turn this idea of sustainability and enjoyment into sort of a defining element. Another thing that has been interesting us quite a bit lately is like an extension of this like idea of environmentalism. This is Bernard Rudowski, who did the exhibition at MoMA called Architecture Without Architects, where he introduced the idea of vernacular architecture. And basically, he had sort of discovered that with the international style of modernism, as the name suggests, buildings had started looking the same everywhere. This is Lever House in New York. This is Hotel Royal in Copenhagen. Basically, because like with the advent of modernism came building engineering and building services, and the machine was seen as this like solution to everything. Le Corbusier used the machine d'habiter as a metaphor for housing. And the idea was that for every quality the architecture would normally provide, you could replace it with a machine. So you need light. So instead of daylight, you make electric lights. You need fresh air. So instead of opening the windows, you get mechanical ventilation. You need a nice temperature. So you get central heating and air conditioning. And suddenly the architecture isn't doing anything anymore. It's just like a dumb container of space. But then it has a machine room full of gas-guzzling machinery that tube feeds it. And as a result, suddenly like buildings starting looking exactly the same, regardless of what culture or climate they were part of. And his suggestion was like, if you look at like pre-modern architecture, you had this vernacular architecture where the local population had found ways of using the local materials in response to the local climate that would sort of create these radically different vocabularies that are not aesthetic or academic, they're like empirical. So you know, like the dome shape of the igloo that combines a minimum surface with a maximum contained volume, like these sunken courtyards in the sort of windy steppes of Mongolia. You have like the white villages of Greece, where the white sort of reflects the heat, and you have the flat roofs where you can go up and enjoy the evening breeze. So what we're suggesting is not like this return to nostalgia, but like what you could call vernacular 2.0, where essentially we would harness all of the sort of contemporary capacity to simulate and model and calculate the performance of a structure like thermal exposure or the wind movement, so that instead of architecture without architects, what we're suggesting, what you could call engineering without engines, that you use sort of contemporary engineering technology to engineer the dependence on mechanical compensation out of the building and put it back into the bones of the building. And in a way also you can say, like, traditionally when you look at the world map, you look at the colors of the different countries, but in fact the Copenhagen climate map is maybe a more relevant way to look at the different challenges of building in different territories. And one sort of example, one of the first times we tried to approach this idea was for a competition for the main energy headquarters of Shenzhen, which is probably the most industrious region in the world. So they have a huge energy bill. And it's a 1 million square foot headquarter building. Essentially, it's an office building in a subtropical climate. So you want to maximize daylight and views, but you also want to minimize thermal exposure and glare. So by making the facade like a pleated dress, opening up completely towards the north, closing completely towards the sun, when you look to the south, you see these bamboo walls washed in daylight, and when you turn around, it's an all-glass building with a good quality of light coming in. Within this logic, you can create entrances, you can create like, executive meeting rooms. And essentially like this basic idea, without any sort of technology or moving parts, reduces the thermal exposure and the air conditioning with 30%. We developed the principle with Arab. And of course, on the inside, it provides a sort of a special quality to the spaces. But it is essentially, what makes this building look different is also what makes it perform differently. It's currently under construction. So then we tried to take this one step further. We got approached by a giant Korean corporation. They have these corporations that make all kinds of things, and we were invited to do a a laboratory for photovoltaics. And we thought, again, because it has to do with the sun, maybe we could sort of base it on somehow dealing with the thermal exposure. It was just like this simple block within an existing master plan with rounded corners. And we thought, when you look at traditional louvers, when they're facing south, they would like to be horizontal to block the relatively vertical incoming sun. But to the east and the west, the ideal angle is more vertical, slightly angled to the north because the sun comes in at a very low angle. But once you apply it to a round shape, the ideal orientation actually of a permanent louver actually becomes this gradient from horizontal to vertical. So essentially, as the sun travels over the sky, the ideal angle changes. So we applied this logic to the building, sort of analyzing the optimum orientation, and it creates this like almost like ornamental pattern where we didn't make a single design decision. It's literally the optimum angle facing the sun, but it actually acquires its own aesthetic. Also, like, of course, you need like BIM modeling, so building information modeling, where you can sort of, even though it looks like an organic and maybe expensive facade, you can start like breaking it down into its constituent parts, how to mount it from the horizontal to the vertical fixed points, the different lengths, that even though you have like a lot of different parts, you can see that, you know, these and these and these are actually all the same. So you can actually get a lot of like rationality into an otherwise like highly tailored form. So you get like all these unique moments that are actually sort of very controllable. Also, you have like, when they turn around the corners, some of them actually twist lightly. When they go north, they actually become shallower because you don't need as much louver. So we took it really far, and like everybody was happy. But then you might remember that 4 years ago there was a huge dip in the stock market prices of photovoltaics. So one day the client called us up and said that it wasn't going to be photovoltaics anymore. They were going to make robot-guided missiles instead. And we have a principle: we don't contribute to arms manufacturing. So the project died after like a year and a half. But then we got invited to look at making the Museum of the Human Body in Montpellier, which is like the cradle of modern medicine in Europe. They have the first sort of medical herbal garden. And it was going to be on the intersection between a park and the city. It had like a quite well-defined space program. So our basic idea was to sort of break this like rather large footprint into a series of pavilions that interconnect, almost like bringing, you have all of the different exhibition spaces connected by a spine. But as a result, it brings the park into the city, and it brings the city into the park. So you have like these little plazas hovering over the landscape, and these little islands of green overlooking the square. And also, like from the park itself, even though it's a rather big building, it looks like individual pavilions where you can sort of sneak between the buildings and find yourself on these accessible roofs. But Montpellier is also the hottest city in France. And since every single facade we had was curvilinear, we could basically take the principles that we have developed, because it's we have a parametric model. So even though it's a slightly different situation, a slightly different climate, the principles are actually the same, and they generate this like almost thumbprint-like pattern on the facades. So it looks like we might be able to get it out of our system after all. So like the climate doesn't only have to be a problem that you have to sort of defend yourself against. I think an important aspect of architecture is also like to get the most out of what's there. One example is we're doing this like sort of condo building in the Bahamas for the privileged. It's next to this marina where you can park your 300-foot yacht. The last time I was there, like Steven Spielberg was navigating his 300-foot yacht around it's like a small ferry, or actually a large ferry. And the idea was that they wanted to have like these really nice condos where, because the climate is so nice, each condo has a balcony that's 15 feet deep with a nice pool. You know, everybody wants a pool on their balcony, obviously. So we thought, instead of like stepping up on this bathtub, of course, if you have a pool on your balcony, you would want to go down into it. So we came up with this idea that basically allow the sort of the balcony to sink down to accommodate the pool. Always place it right above the partition wall of the two homes below, so that basically the entire sort of 15-foot high concrete wall becomes the load-bearing beam that can actually carry the weight of the pool. And suddenly, having developed this very simple system, the facade of the building had sort of designed itself. You also get this like porch-like condition, almost like if you have your own sort of villa with sloping roofs on the balcony. And the pool really becomes part of the facade. The handrails is a single sheet of acrylic glass without any verticals. It's aquarium glass. You can get them up to 75 feet, so it's like every architect's dream to have all glass with no mullions. And at night, the whole architectural expression of the building is really an expression of what's unique about living there, is that you have like your own pool and this like amazing outdoor space. So of course, like exclusivity is quite often associated with architecture, but I think one of the principles we try to sort of adhere to is also this notion of inclusion. And I think waterfronts is one of these things where you see industry moving away and new things moving down. And how do you retain the public aspect? Two quick examples. We've done a project in Bordeaux that is actually bringing an art museum, a theater, and a library together into a new institution. And the challenge was like how to bring these things together while retaining their autonomy, also having a shared aspect. So it's on the waterfront, and we sort of decided to create this sort of almost like an Arc de Triomphe on the waterfront. It creates this loop on the promenade, allowing the promenade to pass through the building. So on one hand, it's a continuation of the promenade. It's also like a window between the city and the river. And sort of you enter into the main lobby through this like generous stair, but also all the different institutions, the library, the theater, and the art galleries actually create this shared room where they all open up and can have like outdoor activities undercover. So as you pass through, you also get glimpses into the lobby. You have the exhibition spaces above, and a sort of an outdoor sculpture garden with a view of the UNESCO city of Bordeaux. And basically, like, we wanted it to be like this sort of, it's made out of the local stone in Bordeaux. So the spaces that need daylight, we try to sort of integrate it into the sort of the fabric of the stones, so that even though they're like up close, they're actually like nice Windows. From a distance, it almost becomes like this pattern on the facade. But essentially, the whole city is invited to participate in this urban room, and it becomes like the shared space for all of the different institutions. Another example is that we're doing a headquarters for one of the biggest Danish pension funds in the middle of the port of Copenhagen. It's right at the tip of this island. And even though Copenhagen is very homogeneous, suddenly in the port you have this like great variety of like power plants and sort of old cranes and warehouses, silos that have been converted into new structures. There's some residences designed by MBRDV wrapping around 2 silos. So there was a certain freedom of exploring different typologies. And then also, when you look at the workspace, like one of the main inventions is the office landscape of the 50s, this sort of open plan. There's the structuralist office that sort of combines different elements into this like organic structure. You have obviously the GSD, this like attempt to navigate the sort of horizontal tyranny of floor plates. But then I think in the sort of mid-late 80s, office buildings suddenly got like incredibly formulaic again, like with these slabs, especially in Europe. And like recently, it's mostly been on the interior design that this sort of playful interiors of Google has become the standard of the sort of the IT business. And recently with both Apple and Facebook, this idea of introducing like lush outdoor activities or like amenities so that when you're doing all-nighters, you can still get some fresh air without losing your Wi-Fi connection. And of course, it has to do like this sort of emphasis on being present has to do with the interaction and the exchange of ideas. Also, when you look at what happens in a typical office, this is like Danish statistics, but on a typical day, like 20 people don't even show up. 6 people are away, but will come back later, and only like half the people are actually at their workspace. And you have like a lot of different ideal depths, from like the very like slim slabs to the sort of the big office floor plates. And basically in Denmark, there's very strict regulations about daylight. So if you want to make deeper floor plates, you also need taller ceiling heights. So basically like our New York office is a more classic office floor plate, and obviously the office landscape in Copenhagen is the other extreme. So, and finally, because it is the port, it's a pension fund, so they want to be seen as being generous towards the city, because it's the people's money that they're investing. And they also they want to sort of create a destination to make this new development area a success. So because it's like the peak of the pier, you can actually build much taller, like 180 feet, than a typical Copenhagen building. So we got this idea of sort of extending the waterfront promenade into this sort of ziggurat that sort of creates a series of different floor plates that have like radically different dimensions, and also creates this park that extends all the way to the roof. So that means that every single floor actually has access to its own terrace. Like the restaurant opens up to this huge terrace overlooking the water. But no matter where you are, you actually have a direct access from your floor out to a terrace. And also the people just passing by can actually reach the sort of tallest located playground in all of Copenhagen. And the intersection of this like sloping ramp and on the horizontal floor plates creates these double height spaces where every single floor, you don't have a big representative atrium in the middle, but you always have these shortcuts where from every single floor you have a direct connection to the floor below and the floor above. So this sort of possibility of spotting one of your colleagues, even though they're on another floor, actually allows for sort of meandering through an otherwise very straightforward working space. And the result becomes like this ziggurat-like silhouette. And basically, like the floor heights also vary from the really tall to the more intimate. And in Copenhagen, we have these historical buildings. This is our Savior Church that has this external spiral stair, so you can actually walk all the way to the spire. You have the round tower, which was built for King Christian IV, because he liked, it was a star observatory. He liked looking at stars, but he hated stairs. So it's made like a ramp where you can ride your horse all the way to the top. It was good to be the king back in the days. And in a way, this idea, it's like almost like the round tower for the people. You can say like it's almost combining the sort of the exotic silhouettes of the historical spires with the rationality of the contemporary office towers into this sort of new hybrid. Also, we looked at the public domain, because like every single surface is a public amenity. And interesting because it's on the waterfront, so there's a lot of wind. But the terraces actually turn out to create these nice sheltered zones adjacent to the building. So even if you're on the higher floors, you actually have generally have good conditions on the outside. And finally, like daylight, as I mentioned, is incredibly important. So we had to sort of verify that it was possible to do these big office plates. It wouldn't be a problem in America, but in Denmark, you really need to sort of verify a certain percentage of daylight. And because one of the drivers of daylight is view of the sky plane, because we have water on 3 sides, there are no neighbors blocking the view of the sky. And then you have reflections from the ground, actually also give additional daylight. So the combination of the terraces and being surrounded by open space and water on all sides meant that we actually have incredibly good light conditions on every single floor plate, no matter what the depth. So as you can see, like obviously this sort of relationship with the public is a major part of our work. But in one case, we tried to take public participation into a complete extreme. You might remember that Denmark had a cartoon crisis a decade ago. A provincial newspaper hired 10 cartoonists on a misconceived crusade for liberty of speech to make fun of the Prophet Muhammad, pissing off 1 billion Muslims worldwide, including all these boys. This is where our office used to be in Copenhagen. We were located in the most ethnically diverse neighborhood in all of Denmark, 60 different nationalities, and we were invited around that time to look at a new urban space. It was a former rail yards. This is Iwan Barn taking photos out of a helicopter. And essentially we created what we call the red square, where everything is shades of red, the black market, where everything is black. But as a sort of main element, and the green park, we thought, like, instead of dealing with the issue of integration as a problem or a challenge, what if we would see it as a potential? So we reached out to the local population and asked them to nominate elements from their other home country. We used the local newspapers, Facebook. We ran local ads. We had a lot of like public meetings where people could nominate elements from their other home country. And the idea is that we don't eat Chinese food to be nice to the Chinese. It's because we crave, Beijing duck. And we didn't put a Moroccan fountain in the middle of Copenhagen to be nice to the Moroccans, but because they have an incredible tradition for architectural water features. So there's a Jamaican sound system where with a Wi-Fi you can plug in your iPhone and make outdoor concerts. The neighbors hate it. But it's actually designed so you can't play louder than the law allows, and it shuts off at 9 p.m. Thai boxing arena from Thailand, Iraqi swings, trash cans from Great Britain, bollards from Ghana, bicycle racks from Finland, a sign from the Red Square. There's a bus stop from Kazakhstan, like way more architecturally advanced than a typical Danish bus stop. We found a slide in Chernobyl. We had to make a copy because the original was radioactive. Sort of manhole covers from different cities. Palm trees from China that actually grow in a Danish climate. The octopus from Japan also sort of highlights this sort of integration of having these like elements to bring different children together. When you look at the benches, it's like a cultural study. From Mexico, an S-curved love seat where you're looking the person you're sitting next to into the eyes. From Belgium, a bench where everybody looks away from each other. So it becomes like this, like almost like a global best practice of different kinds of street furniture. All the way down to the lamps. We have these neon signs that advertise things you can't buy in Denmark. This is a dentist from Qatar. And on the Red Square. And we made an app that actually allows people to sort of understand the story behind the scenes of what are these things and where do they come from. So essentially like trying to make the participation process into like almost the authorship in the project. I'm just going to zoom through, this is going to be a subliminal one. This is Greenland. Of course, also like, obviously identity and heritage, there's like all these factors that are not climatic, but that somehow, because of their significance, overrule the conditions. We recently opened a museum right next to Hamlet's castle, Kronborg. It's the Danish Maritime Museum. Kronborg used to be the home of the museum, but it became UNESCO World Heritage. So they had to kick it out, and they suggested, why don't we put it inside this decommissioned dry dock where they used to build ships. And the museum was twice the size of the dock, so it would be like this underground claustrophobic basement. Also, we would completely hide the historical dock. So we thought if we would turn the museum inside out, or the dock inside out, use the museum as a way of preserving the dock, turning the dock into a courtyard that brings daylight into the museum, even though it's completely underground. Suddenly, all we have to do is design a few bridges, one that stops the water from coming in, one that connects to the castle, and one that sort of descends and brings people into the museum. It also resolved this dilemma that UNESCO said that we weren't allowed to stick as much as a foot out of the ground, but the museum wanted a masterpiece to attract visitors. So by making it a void, we could combine the need for invisibility with the desire for exposure. So then, you know, this is like this moment where suddenly the dock that used to be a hole suddenly became an object in an even bigger hole. We could manufacture the bridges on a Chinese shipyard, just the way you make ships. These big steel structures are lifted into the dock and it clicked in place. To prevent cars from driving into the dock, we made these like mooring elements that are actually Morse code. So if some of you can read Morse code, there's a secret message. So basically, you descend on this ADA accessible ramp because we couldn't even make an elevator tower. We had to resolve access sort of old school style. So you gradually slope down, enter the exhibition, and then you have this sort of series of spaces that change dimensions from the very intimate to sort of the vertical and narrow to like the huge cargo bay. We could even like bring daylight into the workstations. And essentially the idea is that everything you see is like real elements. Like these are earth anchors, because as soon as we emptied the dock and put a museum around it, it becomes almost like a ship. It really wants to pop up from the uplift from the water and sail away. So these anchors actually go 120 feet into the ground. So paradoxically, it's actually the tallest building we've built in Denmark, but from the horizon and down. And also, this is the access bridge where the handrail of the sort of arrival is used as additional structural depth. So you can see here we have a lot of depth, but the lower floor, because it comes so close to the ground, we wanted to make it as slim as possible. So you can see it's like a quarter of the height. And that's made possible because the floor that you're walking on is actually hanging in the ceiling above you. So this is not like a theatrical element. It's an anchor chain. It's like a hard-working part of the structure that shortens the span of the lowest beam and hangs it from the ceiling. And also, like, you have the real dock outside where they used to build ships. So you have this contrast between the lightness and the heaviness of the old. The auditorium for the grown-ups uses, passes under the stage and creates an auditorium for the children. And the restaurant is where the dock actually sort of continues through the glass and into the museum. And you get this view out all across the full length of the dock. So I think it's like this nice combination of like something sort of extremely historical, the UNESCO castle, and then this like very contemporary world sunken beneath it. This is me and my girlfriend performing an inverse Titanic moment. Right, then another sort of like sometimes heritage is positive, but we're actually doing a project on the west coast of Denmark where heritage is like more negative. It's Denmark was obviously occupied during the Second World War, and the Germans built this like whole line of defenses with these big bunkers, and one of the bunkers was a cannon bunker that was where the cannon was supposed to be installed in September 1945. Happily, the war never lasted that long. So the bunker is now sitting in the middle of this historical dune landscape. So we were asked to do a bunker museum, a local history museum, an amber museum, and an art museum right next to this historical bunker. So because the bunker is like this strong object, we try to, and it's like this heaviness with like a sort of a heavy historical weight. We decided to make the museum as an absence of dune. So basically the four galleries create this location of these slices into the landscape, so you can hardly see the building. It's like just like the paths sinking down. So when you arrive, you only see the bunker, and then as you get closer, you see these little slices in the dunes. You find this little sunken courtyard, and from here you can sort of enter and descend into the galleries that have an abundance of daylight, even though they're underground. It seems like everything we do in Denmark is underground. And from here you can go into the bunker. And we thought like it's hard to understand what the bunker is because the cannon was never installed. So we found the production drawings of the bunker, and we proposed to create this glass prism. A stair takes you to the top, where we recreated like almost like a wireframe of the old cannon, but instead of actually having it as a cannon, it's a giant binocular that allows you. It's like this. If you just have enough distance between two lenses, you don't need the binoculars in between. So we can actually create a binocular that can look 55 kilometers, which was the range of the cannon, and suddenly intuitively you can understand, the strategic position of this bunker in the middle of the dunes. So it's like almost like recreating a ghost of a gun that was never installed. We got a full sponsorship for the whole museum, but we haven't found anyone who's willing to pay money to recreate an old Nazi cannon. I guess it's a hard sell. So bringing me back to America, there's 15 minutes more. The reason I often get the objection when I'm showing these projects, mostly from Europe, that in America people say, yeah, it only works in like semi-socialist Scandinavia. Welcome to the real world. But we actually got invited by Douglas Durst to look at this site in Hell's Kitchen. And it's actually sandwiched between the highway, a power plant, and a waste management facility. So we thought they really need an oasis. And essentially this is the courtyard building from Copenhagen where my dad grew up. It is at the architectural scale what Central Park is at the urban scale. So our proposition was to combine the density of the skyscraper with the communal space of the courtyard, or essentially what could a court scraper look like. So by giving the courtyard the density of the skyscraper, we lift it up to 500 feet in the northeast corner. It lowers to invite the sun from the south and the view over the Hudson, creating this like striking new silhouette on the waterfront. A spire from the east. The courtyard actually has the same proportions as Central Park, only it's 13,000 times smaller. Because of the asymmetry from a handrail to a tower, everybody has a view of the Hudson. And we went through the ULERP process and have been like building for the last 2 2.5 years. So it's actually starting to show quite massively on the skyline. We're gonna top out this Christmas. So I think it's gonna be like a sort of a quite memorable moment on the otherwise like rather, all of this is like Donald Trump. A relatively straightforward recipe, and I think it's going to be pretty interesting to see this next to it. So, of course, like arriving in North America, we got to deal with a whole new kind of density. And just one example was that we were invited to look at Vancouver on this site where Granville Bridge touches downtown, tearing the whole site into useless triangles. Then we started mapping all of the restraints. There were setbacks from the streets, setbacks from the bridges. And then it was like almost like a deal breaker, 100-foot setback from every single bridge because the city wants to make sure that nobody looks into the traffic. And then there was a park where we couldn't cast shadows. So in the end, we were left with a tiny triangle, 6,000 square feet, too small to build. But then we thought, like, we own all of this land. So if it's a question of having a minimum distance, once we get 100 feet up in the air, we can actually come back, make a 12,000 square foot floor plate. So as a result, when you drive over Granville Bridge, it's almost as if someone is pulling a curtain aside, sort of welcome to Vancouver. It has like almost like looks like a genie coming out of a bottle and sort of expanding in the air. The way it's possible is simply because it's not a shocking cantilever on a single floor, it's a gradual walking column. So essentially you have on the lowest floor it's like the triangular footprint, and then basically these slabs gradually move position and finally end up becoming like these slender columns on the upper floors. So even though it looks both curving and triangular, every single line is actually 90 degrees only. And so it reminded us of the Flatiron, because like the Flatiron is a child of this moment in Manhattan real estate history where the advent of the elevator, steel structure, and the real estate value suddenly made like a silly site into like what is now the namesake of a whole neighborhood. It's just taking it one step further. But underneath the bridge, you know, you see all these conditions where, like, you know, for instance, like the High Line is the most popular promenade in New York right now. But we have to deal with the underside of the bridge, and because of the weather in Vancouver, it's very wet. To have like an urban canopy could actually be a really good thing. And then we're working with Rodney Graham and a group of local Vancouver artists to turn the underside of the bridge into like the 16th chapel of street art. So the entire underside becomes like an art gallery turned upside down. So trying to sort of completely reconfigure the perception of being under a bridge. So that brings me to the last project. Basically, this like notion of social infrastructure, that you see so many examples where existing infrastructure is converted into something, either cultural or environmental or social. Like the most popular power plant in London, like the Popular Art Museum in London, is actually a power plant. Like one recent example was we've been looking at trying to sort of see if we can create the resilience infrastructure for Manhattan to make sure that the entire Lower Manhattan doesn't get wiped out the next time a Sandy arrives. So we've gone through this like lengthy project with HUD to try to incorporate all of the sort of necessary infrastructure for flood protection, but in a way that's actually going to be sort of inhabitable and seen as an amenity for the different citizens of New York. And this is a project that almost requires a whole lecture on its own. So just to give you one example of social infrastructure where we proactively combine infrastructure and amenity is a building we're building right now in Copenhagen. It's in the middle of the city. It could be the landmark of Copenhagen in the future. This is the opera. This is the Royal Theatre. But it's not going to be a royal palace or cultural palace. It's going to be a power plant that turns household trash into electricity and heating. So together with the citizens of Copenhagen, it forms like an ecosystem of waste that comes back as energy. If you look at trash as a resource, a ton of trash equals 1 2/3 of an oil barrel in energy value. And like these power plants operate on the economy of scale. So they are huge, ugly boxes that cast shadows on the neighbors and block the views. This is going to be the tallest and biggest building in all of Copenhagen. It's going to be right next to the marina. And right next to it, the local boys go water skiing in Copenhagen Cable Park. So we thought, how can we actually turn this into an amenity for, like, to create some YIMBYism, yes, in my neighborhood, or yes, in my backyard. So speaking of skiing, like in Denmark, we have snow. It's a cold country, but we have absolutely no mountains. But apparently we do have mountains of trash. So Copenhageners go 4 hours to Isaberg in Sweden. But because of the sheer magnitude of our building, it's 300 feet tall, we can actually do 2/3 of Isaberg on the roof of our power plant. We know how big the machinery is. So we create this like winding ski slope. An elevator takes you to a black, a blue, and a green slope. There's like a park with trees. We plant trees on top of the column, so it actually becomes like this public park on the roof of the power plant. Like insanely, we won the competition based on this idea. So suddenly we had to figure out how to do it. But just to give you an idea, like this is the roof plan of the power plant. This is an Olympic half pipe. Basically, this is the Sochi half pipe and the outline of the power plant. So, like this is like half the length, and the entire sort of roof has this like immense proportion. There's also like vents and various technical equipment coming out, creating a man-made landscape. So it's not only for the people skiing. Like actually in Sochi, Denmark got 0 medals. And our hope is now that we can practice at home, we might actually do better in the future. But also people that don't ski, there's like a hiking path through the trees that gives you access to like amazing views of the otherwise flat city of Copenhagen. The facade is made, there's the tallest climbing wall in the world for people with balls of steel, 300 feet. And the facade has these prefabricated aluminum planters that are like incredibly light but very stiff because of their geometry, filtering daylight into the plant and the workspaces. So in a way, you can say this sort of idea of turning cities and buildings into ecosystems is very close to coming to completion here, because locally we harvest the different resources, the rain, the sunlight, the sort of natural ventilation, but also together with the city of Copenhagen, it forms like a metabolism of waste and energy that really makes it a single ecosystem. And the reason that this ski slope is possible is because 1/3 of the volume of the power plant is actually all of the cleaning technology, the scrubbers that take out CO2, different elements that take out various toxins. So this smoke coming out of the chimney is completely non-toxic. It only contains steam and CO2, much less than any other power plant, but still some CO2. So we thought it could be interesting to sort of express this. Of course, the reason that the CEO of the company liked the idea was because she could see that the ski slope made something invisible visible, that normally you would never go near a power plant because it would be like completely poisonous. But here you actually have fresh mountain air right next to it or on top of it. But we thought also to play with the chimney, to rebrand this idea of a power plant. So we designed the chimney so that it accumulates emissions and puffs it out as a gigantic smoke ring. And the idea is that it takes something that used to be poisonous and turns it into something playful. Like the ultimate symbol of hedonistic sustainability. And the thinking is that like each time you count a smoke ring, it's like announcing that we just emitted 1 ton of CO2. Our original idea was that it should be the smoke that was being puffed out. But the problem is that the smoke is actually so clean that you can't see it. But we still really like the idea, so we went through like a lot of different tests, and finally we found out that basically if we accumulate the steam in a sort of compression tank, we can actually release it in bursts that would be visible. And we allied ourselves with a group that is called Copenhagen Suborbitals. It's a bunch of crazy do-it-yourself guys that are actually making space rockets in a workshop that looks like a bicycle repair shop. So they know how to deal with these big machines. So we've made like a ton of miserably failed attempts. But like at the end of August, we had a pretty interesting test that you can see here.
Der er kraftedeme ikke noget at diskutere.
Nu tror jeg sgu på det.
Det er fandme godt. Ej, hvor er det vigtigt. Hvor er det vigtigt.
So I think it sort of plugs into this idea of the world-changing capacity of architecture. That like architecture is almost the art of turning fiction into fact. Because when you come up with something like this, it seems to be like science fiction. You know, a power plant where you ski on the roof and it puffs smoke rings. It's like get out of here. But the beautiful thing is that from 2017, it's just gonna be how it is. You know, like it's like in Venice, people sail in gondolas through the streets full of water, and in Copenhagen, they ski on their power plants and they puff smoke rings. So I think that it's this sort of world-changing capacity that architecture has that I think is important to remember, that it's not just a stylistic or formal exercise. It's really a question of trying to dream up the kind of world you would want to live in, and then once you sort of fight all the obstacles and make it happen, suddenly the world is actually the way you dreamt it would be. Ta-dam! So I totally consumed my allotted time, but like if there's any energy in the room, we could have a little conversation.
So any questions? I think maybe because this is the first lecture, and because there are a lot of people who are new to the school, then you arrive and you show like project after project after project, and show that these kinds of what used to be called fantasia, this kind of modes of imagination are kind of possible, and you make it seem so easy. I'm sure that it's not that easy. So in the spirit of sort of this being the first lecture, and with so many new people, I think it would be nice, Bjarke, if you just talked a little bit about how did you get here? What made you so focused on this idea of possibilities, and how did you go from OMA to plot to big and still keep up this kind of sense of optimism? So give us a little sense of some of your secrets to get here, not, you know, just before you got to this point of being able to do this. What does it take? Maybe we can talk about that a little bit.
I think you definitely have to have somehow the same genetics as the Energizer Bunny in a way, like that. Like no matter what, you have to somehow like get up and keep trying. Because I mean, what I should have said was like, of course, after having taught at the GSD, all doors just opened, and but no, I think I think one thing, like, I think this idea of motivation is incredibly important. That if you know what you're doing and why you're doing it, it becomes way easier to find the energy to keep pushing. And I think maybe the most important thing to do in a school, because like I landed at the Art Academy in Copenhagen a little bit by accident, because like literally, you know, education is free in Denmark, so you can be a little bit more promiscuous in your choice of education. And I thought back then, like, computers hadn't really become the new paradigm. So the first 2 years, the school was literally just teaching you all kinds of skills of how to draw. And I thought I had spent most of my life drawing people in action or vehicles, helicopters, animals, whatever. But I hadn't been drawing buildings or backgrounds. So I thought that the architecture school could help me with that. But then, of course, you get into it, and then you try to understand it. And then I think so much in architecture is arbitrary. Like some people like triangles, some people like white, some people like concrete, some people... And like quite often, the oeuvre of an architect is resting on a few unquestioned assumptions. But if you question those assumptions, you know, the whole thing becomes arbitrary or a question of taste. And I think for me, the eureka moment was when I really understood that architecture was not an autonomous art form. It was literally the manifestation of certain aspects of society in built form. Like in a way, architecture facilitates things or manifests things like certain values, like for instance, the fact that all buildings are shaped by you know, the Fire Safety Code and the Americans Disabilities Act code has an impact on the buildings. And if you can find ways of working with it, you can end up getting something like quite expressive that expresses these elements. Like for instance, like the first project I showed, this viewing tower where the weird flower-like shape is a product of this aspect of society, access for all. And I think in that sense, like once you know what you're doing, you get the energy to do it. And I think in every single project, because sometimes we find ourselves in a situation where we're doing a competition or commission. You know, of course, you have to solve the brief and you have to have X amount of square meters and blah blah. But if you haven't really found the true core of the question, it becomes like an aesthetic exercise or like you know, trying to make it nice. And for instance, like in the power plant, the last project we did, we already had the phantom design of the machinery, and of course they wanted a nice building around the machines. But for like 6 weeks, it was purely cosmetics. It was just trying to make it look nice. And it was only once we got this idea that because the power plant was so clean, we could really turn it into a destination and amenity. Like, and then once we thought it's right next to the beach in Copenhagen, so it's not like they needed public space. But once we got this idea that topography is something we don't have in Copenhagen, you know, suddenly we were on a mission. And designing the building became easy, and finding all the arguments became easy. And like basically the whole steam ring, of course, like the client is a public-owned company, so they're not allowed to pay for something as silly as steam rings. So we decided like either the idea was going to fade away, or we would invest a substantial amount of thousands of dollars and our own time in making it happen, because you know, like we believe so much in this like radical reimagining of what a power plant could be that it needs the steam rings also. So I think that the key is really always to make sure that you have identified why or what's relevant, why is it important, and once you have answered that question, then you have all the energy in the world to do it.
Do you ever get exhausted of like having to be inventive and come up with something different? I mean, do you ever dream of being Peter Zumthor one night?
Yeah, exactly. I definitely would love to have his working conditions. I've heard that he doesn't accept a schedule, so he accepts a job, and then he has an hourly rate, and then he just designs until he gets there. That would be fantastic. It's very enviable.
Any thoughts? Any questions? We'd like to encourage everybody to participate, so don't be shy. Do I see a hand somewhere?
There is a hand up there.
Where? Okay. There's a lady back. Is that a lady back there? It's dark. Yes.
Maybe just shout it. I'll repeat it.
No, but it's because they're filming, so they...
Okay.
Do you have the mic?
Yeah. So a lot of your
What
work
happened to lady? Okay.
deals with like engaging the like the Lego factory. It's engaging the public, and a lot of it's inherently political too. And I understand why, like, you wouldn't want to, for PR reasons, design a missile factory. But I'm wondering, as architects, if somebody's going to be designing these buildings, these headquarters, like in a fantasy world, what would be done to that type of program to make it more present in everybody's minds? I mean, you're doing pension fund headquarters and condos for ultra rich in the Bahamas. How do you contrast those different program types and kind of reconcile accepting different projects based on their greater meaning in architecture and planning?
Was the question that, like, how would we have designed the arms factory if we would have stayed on? Or?
Right, yeah. Understanding that it's...
I mean, I totally get what you're saying. And like the thing is, like, we made this like very basic principle decision that the problems about arms is that you don't know who's going to be using them. So since we, it's a little bit like too much out of our control. And also like we signed this treaty with the United Nations that involves like not contributing to arms manufacturing. So it's very simple. And it's once in a while it's nice to have unbendable principles. But we did actually we spent 2 years of our lives working for the National Library of Kazakhstan, which is not exactly the most democratic country in the world. According to Jeffrey Inaba, who also teaches here sometimes, I think one of the president's main political opponents was found dead after having committed suicide by shooting himself twice in the chest and once in the head. So it's a tragic suicide. But the reason we engaged was because our thinking was that would the citizens of Kazakhstan be better off with an amazing national library that we had designed or not? And in that sense, we thought the answer would be yes. And like when you look at it technically, most of the institutional buildings that form the core of the Danish democracy have actually been built by kings that were not democratically elected. But
you just lost that job, though.
What?
You just lost that job, I think. The one in Kazakhstan.
No, we lost it before I started bitching about it, because what happened was, and that's the problem about these regimes, is that while working there, 3 times I was personally asked for bribes. My colleagues and our consultants, the engineers, were asked for bribes, and we kept refusing them. Because like one thing that I want even less than building a national library is spending the rest of my life in a Kazakhstan prison cell. At some point they were insinuating that if we didn't sign some papers, some of our staff would be, and this is like people working for the president's office, some of our staff might be busted in customs carrying contraband. So the same night we flew out all of our staff from Kazakhstan, and around the same time, another contractor had offered the president's office that they could do a different design on our foundations with Norman Foster as the architect, and that building has now been completed. So I think also like Norman Foster could definitely teach us a few things about how to navigate in countries like Kazakhstan, because we clearly didn't have the skills. So I think there is this question about architecture, and I think architecture, like great architecture, might always be able to contribute, but it's not always that you can contribute under conditions that make sense for you. And in the case of the Korean company, they also totally understood that we had to step down. So I think it does make sense to have certain principles, but I also think that you shouldn't only work in like social democracies. You can totally contribute on a lot of different levels in a lot of different situations.
Thanks.
Just want to thank you for a great presentation and a wonderful portfolio. Also, I wanted to see if you could speak a little bit about your experience with some interesting clients and also contractors, and just the relationship that you've had working in a collaborative team on these really fascinating projects.
Yeah, because I think the one thing about clients, I think like a lot of the most interesting work we're doing has actually been developed in collaboration with the commissioners, and it's our experience that it's always incredibly important to have direct access to the key decision makers. Because if you're only dealing with the mid-level management, it's impossible to bend the rules. Whereas if you can sort of speak directly to the head of the dragon, then you actually have a chance to speak to, let's say, the spirit of the code rather than the letter of the code. Like for instance, like also with the power plant, for instance, I had met the director, the CEO of the company, because I had given some talks at the Danish Energy Board where she's a member. So I knew that she was quite special, and I had a feeling that she might actually like this wild idea. Otherwise, we might not have had the guts to propose it. And like for instance, in the case of the New York building we're doing for the Dursts, I met Douglas Durst in a conference, and he showed his portfolio of work, and he definitely has like an amazing history of the environmental performance. He did the first LEED Platinum certified high-rise office tower in the world, the Bank of America in New York, where it's also their headquarters. So they have like this like real genuine ambition, but the designs aesthetically were quite far from the kind of work we're doing. So, but we kind of liked each other. So I invited him to some things. I was teaching at Columbia. He came. I invited some of his people to come and review. We taught a studio at Yale together. So there was a kind of friendship, but neither of us saw each other as potential, collaborators until at some point there was enough, mutual trust or whatever that he suggested. Also, the beginning, his idea for the West 57 site was to do a mid-rise, and that's how we even got started on this courtyard idea. And then at some point, he changed his mind and said we need to have the density focused on the east, and then it became this like radically skewed thing that I'm still like pinching my arm that we're actually building this thing in Manhattan. But I know for a fact that if we would have come through the door on day one with that design, it would never have happened. It would have been the end of the conversation, I think. But because we arrived there through this interactive process back and forth, every single team member had been through every single step, and everybody knew why we had gotten there, and finally it was the obvious thing to do. So I think one thing maybe that facilitates collaboration is also the reason we make so many models and so many drawings is that when you are a lot of different people, you can't just talk out of your head. You need to put things onto the table, literally, physically onto the table, because what people say is subject to all kinds of interpretations, and we might agree, but actually we think about two different things, or we might radically disagree, but if we would actually do it, maybe we could actually agree about it. And it's quite often like once it's there, other people can see it, they can interpret it, they can contribute to it. And then also, every step of the way, like sometimes people say that we are good at telling the story about our work, but it's also because every step of the way we always reiterate why it is we've gotten here, why it is we didn't go there or there or there. And by constantly reiterating how we got there, in a way you empower the whole team, not just internally in the office, but also collaborators, contractors, clients, decision makers, municipal architects, etc., to step in. These are the criteria with which we have chosen to do this and not this. And then once everybody gets access to the source code of the design, they can actually be active contributors to the design. And by understanding, you also facilitate action. And by giving everybody a share in the knowledge of why it is the way it is, suddenly they also have ownership of why it is the way it is. So I think the whole sort of pedagogical manifestation of the whys and the reasons of how you get there is maybe the most important thing to facilitate the collaboration.
Bjarke, thank you so much for the inspiration. Thank you all for being here. Thank you.